Welcome to a deep dive dedicated to proving that sometimes being the subtle sibling in the family, well, that's what makes you truly special.
Exact.
Today, we're strapping on our proverbial guitars and plunging into the history of an absolute classic that, often gets overshadowed.
Yeah, it really does.
The MXR Phase 45 Model MX105.
The Phase 45, it's kind of the quiet hero of the modulation world, isn't it?
Definitely.
Most musicians, they immediately think of the Phase 90 when MXR is mentioned, but our source material today gives us this incredibly focused look at the 45.
Right.
We're talking its unique origins, its deceptively simple circuit design, and maybe why this specific two-stage phaser has such a fiercely loyal following.
And that's really our mission today, isn't it? To understand why MXR, having already kind of perfected the more dramatic Phase 90 sound, why they chose to release a pedal that was, half as intense. We want to figure out why this two-stage wonder achieves a specific, really musical quality that its bigger siblings just can't replicate.
There's definitely something unique there.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So historically, we placed the Phase 45 very early on. We're talking typically around 1974.
Wow, that early.
Yeah, this was during MXR's initial production phase, what people often call the reference era, the script logo pedals.
The cursive ones.
Exactly. And it arrived shortly after the four-stage Phase 90 had already made some serious waves.
So, okay, if the 90 was already the benchmark for that big, dramatic, sweeping phase effect, why did MXR deliberately choose to make the 45 sound, half as intense? What was the thinking there?
Well, the difference is entirely technical, but it was completely intentional. The Phase 90 uses 4 phasing stages. That's what creates that really deep, swirling, almost psychedelic sound everyone knows.
Right, the classic phase sound.
The 45, by contrast, uses only a 2-stage phasing circuit. It seems it was engineered specifically to be simpler and far more subtle. You basically only get 2 notches moving through the frequency sweep instead of 4.
And functionally, that's the magic trick, isn't it? Because you have fewer stages, the sweep isn't as deep. It's not dramatically filtering the signal in the same way.
Exactly. It functions more like light phasing.
So it moves from being this full-blown effect that kind of takes over your sound to more of an ambient coloration, like a texture you're just painting onto the existing tone.
Precisely. It's the seasoning, maybe, not the main ingredient. And that whole philosophy of simplicity, it's visible even in the controls. Like a lot of those early pedals, it have just one control knob. Speed.
Just speed, that's it.
That's it. That varies the rate of the modulation, the LFO.
And for those maybe not deep into pedal electronics, how exactly does that speed knob work inside the box? What's it actually controlling?
So it controls the LFO, that's the low-frequency oscillator.
Yeah.
You can sort of think of the LFO as the engine that dictates the speed of that phasing sweep. In the Phase 45, turning that single knob just adjusts how quickly that 2-stage filtering effect moves through the frequency range. You can go from a really gentle, almost glacial wave
Nice description.
to a much faster, kind of wobbly pulse.
Gotcha. Now, let's talk about the original vintage units. Because while the internal design sounds really elegant, the actual user experience, it lacked some modern creature comforts, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's fascinating is how much those originals really relied on the player's intuition.
How so?
Well, in those early vintage versions, there was absolutely no LED indicator. None.
No light. Seriously.
Seriously. Determining if the pedal was actually engaged had to be done purely by ear. Just listening for that subtle shift in the signal.
That's commitment. I mean, imagine playing a gig, maybe in a loud club, and you need just a hint of phase on a chorus, and you're having to rely purely on your stage monitors or maybe just the feel to tell if you've actually hit the switch correctly. That must have been a real pressure point for gigging musicians back in the mid-70s.
Definitely adds a layer of uncertainty. And of course, power was a simpler affair, too. There was no DC power jack.
Ah, battery only.
Exactly. These early units ran exclusively on a 9-volt battery. So, constant battery checks were just part of the regular maintenance routine if you used it a lot.
Okay, let's move inside the box for a sec, because collectors really obsess over the construction of these early models. What was special about the wiring?
Well, many of the vintage circuits were hand-wired, sometimes described as point-to-point or maybe turret construction.
And why does that matter so much to people? What's the difference?
It matters because unlike modern printed circuit boards or PCBs where components are sort of mass assembled onto a board,
Right.
this manual process, it required really high craftsmanship. It often used arguably higher quality component connections, and it actually allowed the builder to potentially tune the circuit manually to some degree. This contributes to that famous sonic consistency and, frankly, the durability people associate with those vintage units.
And externally, they had that very specific look, that characteristic burnt muted orange color.
Oh yeah, the color is iconic.
The source material actually gave us an amazing super niche detail about that paint color, though, didn't it?
It did. It's a wonderful piece of trivia, really. It's noted that the paint used for the enclosure was specifically Ditzler PPG M5148 Bold Orange.
Okay.
And if you actually check the records, that specific code, it was a 1974 Ford truck color.
No way. A Ford truck color.
Yes. It's kind of hilarious to think this iconic guitar effect shares paint code DNA with, like, a pickup truck from the same year.
That's the kind of fact you just don't forget. Amazing. So, okay, the lack of LED and DC jack was standard for the time. Did MXR ever integrate those kinds of modernizations into the Phase 45 later on?
They did, yeah. Around 1981, MXR shifted into what collectors call their box logo period 2.
Okay.
And this is when they began incorporating LEDs and DC power jacks across pretty much their whole pedal lineup. So if you find a later box logo Phase 45, it might well include those quality of life improvements.
But the really early one.
But the earliest and arguably most collectible script logo versions, they remain resolutely old school. No lights, no power jacks.
Okay, so we've got the mechanics, the history. Now the big question. What does this two-stage subtlety actually sound like musically? And why is it sometimes preferred over the much more famous 90 by certain players?
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting. The critical difference, sonically, lies in how aggressively the phasing circuit interacts with the mid-range frequencies of the guitar signal.
Right.
Because the 45 only has 2 stages, it's consistently described in reviews as warm, organic, and importantly, rarely harsh.
Okay, rarely harsh. That sounds good.
Crucially, it doesn't scoop out the mid-range as dramatically as the 4-stage Phase 90 does. It tends to preserve the guitar's fundamental tone more.
Ah, so it sits better in a band context sometimes.
That's exactly why players often consider it more usable in the mix. It can act like this sort of shimmer or movement that doesn't really fight the vocals or the drums for frequency space.
So it's not trying to completely transform your guitar sound. It's more about enhancing it.
Interesting. Where's the sonic sweet spot then when you're setting that single speed knob?
The consensus in the reviews we looked at is that the sweet spot is often found somewhere between, say, 9 o'clock and the midpoint, maybe noon.
Okay.
That range gives you those really gentle, organic swirl textures. If you push the speed much higher, though, the sources note, the sound starts to kind of blur the line between a traditional phaser and other modulations.
Like what?
Specifically, people say it starts to approach textures that resemble maybe a univibe or even a rotary speaker sound at faster speeds.
Oh, interesting. So it gets a bit more wobbly and complex.
Yeah, it takes on a different character.
What really stands out, though, connecting back to the circuit simplicity, is how interactive the pedal seems to be. It's not just a static effect you switch on, right?
No, not at all. It is highly sensitive, perhaps precisely because of that simple low-stage design. It reacts quite profoundly to the nuances of your playing.
Like what specifically? Well, things like your guitar's volume knob, the tone controls, even which pickup you select. Rolling back your guitar's tone knob or volume noticeably affects how pronounced that phasing effect is within the signal chain.
Wow. So it almost requires you to play into the pedal, making it feel like a real extension of the instrument itself rather than just some separate box sitting on the floor.
Exactly, which is probably why it became a bit of a secret weapon for players looking for that very specific, non-invasive kind of texture. It works with you.
Right. Now let's talk collectability, because these are, from what I gather, far less common out in the wild than Phase 90s, which you seem to find everywhere.
Oh yeah, that rarity is a huge part of the appeal for collectors. The 45 was definitely less commonly produced, or at least less widely adopted than the 90. So vintage units are significantly less plentiful.
And sources confirm that.
Yeah, sources like Grave Guitars, for example, describe the 45 pretty accurately as relatively cool and rare.
And as always with vintage MXR, that cursive script logo reigns supreme, I assume.
It absolutely does. The script logo versions are generally considered more collectible than later box logo versions.
Even though the box logos might actually offer better functionality, like an LED or a DC jack sometimes?
Even then, collectors tend to prioritize the earliest build characteristics, the original circuit design. That strip logo signifies the first generation.
Got it. So since finding a true vintage unit in good condition is pretty difficult and probably expensive, MXR under Dunlop's custom shop, they did attempt to recreate the magic, right?
Yes, they did. With the 75 vintage Phase 45 reissue, the model number was CSP 105.
And what was the goal there? Just clone it.
They really went to great lengths, apparently, to achieve authenticity. They claimed it had a hand-wired circuit, just like many originals. They used authentic parts like CTS pots, switchgraph jacks, Carling switches.
The good stuff.
The good stuff. And they also specifically emphasized using hand-matched FETs.
Okay, matched FETs. That's a term you hear thrown around a lot in vintage pedal discussions. Can you quickly explain what FETs are and why matching them actually matters so much for a phaser like this?
Sure. So FET stands for field effect transistor. In a phaser circuit, these transistors are basically the key components that create the necessary phase shift in the signal. They're really a heart of the phasing circuit.
Right.
Now, bulky Ts naturally have some variance in their electrical characteristics, like resistance and performance, right out of the factory. So matching them means selecting FETs that behave very, very similarly.
And why is that important for the sound?
It ensures that the two phasing stages shift the signal evenly and predictably. If the FETs aren't well matched, the effect can sound kind of uneven, maybe wobbly in a bad way, or sometimes described as squishy. It detracts from that smooth, warm, organic quality the Phase 45 is really famous for.
Ah, okay. So that attention to detail shows they really understood the sonic goal of the reissue. But there's a catch for anyone hoping to just go out and snag one of these reissues right now, isn't there?
That's correct. The reissue, the CSP 105, is currently labeled by Dunlop as a legacy product no longer in production.
Ah, so it was a limited run.
Seems like it, or at least it's not currently being made, which means if you want one today, you're likely back on the secondary market looking for used ones.
Right, just like the originals. Finally, let's touch on the known challenges of owning or restoring actual vintage MXR pedals. The sources mention some specific age-related maintenance issues you might run into.
Yeah, the common headaches for collectors dealing with these old MXR boxes often relate to material decay inside.
Like what?
Well, the interior foam, or sometimes adhesive padding that was used to secure the circuit board.
Yeah.
It often degrades or crumbles over, 40, 50 years.
Oh, right. That black gunk you sometimes see.
Exactly. And that can complicate restoration efforts, or even just trying to safely remove the board for cleaning or repair. It gets messy.
And functionally, these early pedals sometimes suffered from a noticeable volume shift when you kick them on, right? Like a slight drop or maybe even a boost. Was there ever a fix for that?
Yeah, that slight volume difference is a noted quirk. It's basically caused by the internal gain staging of the circuit.
Could you briefly explain gain staging in this context? What does that mean?
Sure. Gain staging just refers to how the signal volume, or gain, is calibrated at different points as it passes through the pedal circuit.
Okay.
Because the Phase 45 circuitry itself slightly alters the signal volume when it's active, some vintage units experience that perceived volume drop or boost compared to the bypass signal.
And the fix?
To address this, especially on the reissues or with mods, some sellers offered an optional internal trim pot modification.
A little adjustment knob inside.
Exactly. This small internal pot allowed users to precisely calibrate the volume of the effect when it's turned on, letting you set the on volume to perfectly match your bypass signal. So, no more jump or drop.
That makes sense. A useful mod. So wrapping this all up, what does this deep dive really tell us? The Phase 45, maybe the forgotten brother in the MXR family. It kind of proves that engineering simplicity doesn't always mean a simpler result, does it?
Not at all.
It means achieving this unique subtlety and warmth that its bigger, more dramatic siblings just can't quite match. And that seems to have secured its place as, well, an absolute hidden classic.
Yeah, I think so. And if you think about this in the wider context of today, you've got modern digital multi-mode pedals, like MXR's own Phase 95, for instance.
Right, the mini one.
Yeah, and those often incorporate the functions of both the Phase 45 and the Phase 90, sometimes even more, all in one small box. And this leads to this really interesting debate you see sometimes in user forums online. Will a simpler, dedicated pedal, like the original 45, remain a priority, like a core catalog product for Dunlop? Or has its essential sound now been successfully, digitized and combined into these multi-effects? It's an open question.
That definitely raises an important final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Given the Phase 45's really unique sensitivity to your guitar's own volume and tone settings, does the ideal effect pedal ultimately act less like a separate unit you just switch on and off? And maybe more like a high-fidelity, interactive extension of the instrument itself, something that becomes part of your playing dynamics?
That's a great question. Something to ponder next time you decide whether to roll back that tone knob just before you hit the switch on your phaser.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the surprisingly subtle, fascinating world of the burnt orange phaser.
Been fun.
We'll catch you next time.